All right, so now we're going to start adding a couple SQL queries. One of the things about Dapper is that it doesn't come with a unit of work. So if I can find my documentation on this. If you look at the Dapper tutorial, it just has a connection and executes SQL. And you can make a transaction with it. So we're going to do that by first creating a unit of work. The unit of work will allow us to do multiple transactions. Just 1 second. And so let's add it here into the data access layer. I'm going to add a new folder in here called unit of work. And then we'll add a class here called unit of work. So on this class, we need to have some properties. The first one is I want to have a protected GUID here called ID. And this can be read-only. I also need to have a protected read-only database connection, which is called connection. We're going to need to have the transaction for it, which is called a DB transaction. And then we're going to have our constructor be an internal unit of work. And I'm going to pass in here my database connection, and we're going to call it connection. So after we assign this, we want to also say the ID is a GUID.newGUID. We assign the connection. Then we want to go ahead and open the connection. Well, we're going to assume the connection is already open. So is there like a connection.state? So if my connection state is not open, then we want to do a connection.open. And then finally, I want to do my transaction is equal to my connection.begin transaction. Okay, we need to definitely have a function in here, virtual void called commit. And in this, all it's going to be is a transaction.commit and then a dispose. Now, instead of disposing on this, what I want to do is I want to say transaction.dispose and then a transaction equals new connection.begin transaction. So if you make a commit, it doesn't necessarily dispose the transaction. You can make more commits. We also need to have a public virtual void here for rollback, which is going to be almost the same thing. Finally, we need to have a dispose, which is just going to be a if my transaction does not equal to null, then we want to do a transaction.dispose. And then we'll just expose here a GUID for the ID, a database connection here for the connection, and then I'm imagining I want one more of these for the transaction. And that's it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to extract the interface from this. And we can get rid of this dispose and inherit from iDisposable. And there's our unit of work. Which means that in our service here, I want to have a protected read-only we're going to call it an I unit of work, call it unit of work. And now what we're going to do And now what we're going to do is we need to open our connection. So to create the connection, if I look at my docs, we can just do a new var connection equals new SQL connection. In this one, I can pass in a globals dot connection string. And then we can do a connection dot open asynchronously. We'll just do it, yeah, asynchronously. So here we can do a task.run of this. And when that completes, now you can say your connection dot and you want to do a unit of work equals a new unit of work, and you're going to pass in here connection. And we'll just do this as an open. Now, I personally believe yeah, we'll leave it like that. And now in my dispose, you can say if my unit of work does not equal to null, then you can do a unit of work dot dispose. And you can do this as a base dot dispose and do this as a override. Hey, Deadlion Peter, how have you been? Oh, my projects are coming along great. There's No Turning Back has been published. Ali Chat's been published. OpenDJ Radio's been published. We're working on a new thing to help me monitor a bunch of my apps called the Montiaur. MWeMox, how are you doing? Welcome to the channel. So let's go ahead and work right here now. So when I'm reading this application user, I want to say that I have a line of SQL here, which is a new, and we can just say select the top one of everything from my DBO dot application users as C. And then we'll do a line break. And then we want to say where my C dot ASP.NET user ID is equal to, and then it's going to be a ASP.NET user ID and my C.active equals true. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my entity, and we'll do that by awaiting my connection, my unit of work dot connection. And we're going to query asynchronously here. And this is where Dapper comes into play. And I'm querying for an application user. And I'm going to pass in my SQL. And then also this transaction, which is going to be my unit of work dot transaction. If my entities dot, and for this one we only want to get the first or default. So if my entity does not equal to null, then what I want to do is return a mapper .map from an application user to an application user DTO. Otherwise, we'll just return null. And this can probably be a conditional, like that. You've been busy. In the past few months, I finished my PHP MySQL rewrite of our company's website and launched it. Finally, it allows us to retire the old classic and MS SQL version. That's awesome. I remember when you were telling me that they were giving you a financial incentive to get that thing done as soon as possible. That's awesome. Congratulations, dude. Okay, so up here on this one, we're going to do the same thing, except it's going to be from my ID. The next one is this create. So to do the create, I want to have a piece of SQL which is, what is it, insert into dbo.application users, and we're going to input the ASP.NET user ID and the username. And we're going to do this for these values, which is ASP.NET user ID and @username. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a entity equals my mapper to my map, my application user to the request. And then we're going to say that this is a entity.id is equal to my awaiting my unit of work .connection .execute asynchronous of my SQL, the entity, and the transaction here is the unit of work .transaction. I do want to have another variable up here called a protected int counter. We'll call it a private. So since you've modified this, you can say counter plus plus, and then you can return your mapper.map to a application user DTO from the entity. Okay. The next one here is the update. And then I think we'll go finish this commit, rollback, and dispose here. So for rollback, isn't it just unitofwork.rollback? And isn't this one a unitofwork.commit? And this one we're going to say count equals counter, counter equals 0, and then you want to return your count. And you can do this as a task.fromResult of count. Okay, let's do our update. The update SQL is a update the dbo.application users, and we're going to set just the username to this variable, username. And we're going to do this where my ID is equal to ID and active is true. And then you're going to do a unit of work dot connection dot execute asynchronous, and it's going to be your SQL, the request, and your transaction is your unit of work dot transaction. And then we're going to add one to the counter and return true. And we'll put this whole thing in a try catch, because if this fails, we can just say return false. And our last one, delete, is almost the same thing, because we don't actually ever delete records. We just transition their status, their active flag. So this is going to update, and we're going to set the active to be false, where your ID is and it's active. And then here you're going to execute it and pass in just the ID and count up your counter like that. So we're 1/3 of the way done through adding in our SQL. But what we can do is we can check to see if it's working. And so I can do that by running the app. And then on the web API, when we start up our hub, we can see what happens here. So we'll start it up, and I'll start up the project as well. Sometimes I have to kick this through with a, local host. Let it start up. We'll do a login. Kicks through. We got our ID token, and here we go. We're going to get my user info. We're going to read my application user. It worked. It didn't find anything, which is fine. Now we're going to create a user. That worked. You can see everything worked right. And now we're down here at our logs. And it's not actually ever going to create this, but it did make the commit. And so it's working. So I'm out of time for this morning. We'll be picking up either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. And what we're going to be working on is adding in the remainder of the queries. So let's go ahead and just say that I'll be back here at like 6 o'clock p.m. PST tonight. And then thank you guys very much for staying with me. If you haven't, make sure you check us out at our Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com. I also put all these videos up at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. And thanks again, and I hope you have a great rest of your morning. See you guys later. Bye.